the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and I'm thrilled to have David T. Etheredge with me on the factory floor today. Welcome aboard, David.
Thanks, Mookie. This seems like it's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, as the Chinese say, we're in interesting times, whether that's a blessing or a curse. I think that's going to be a key aspect of our back and forth today. David is a technology entrepreneur, and he is a science fiction writer. And we are sub-stackers where we stacked a little bit together. And I'm intrigued by his inference serialized content. You like to share ideas related to AI, writing, and there's never a dull moment. So let's level set by talking about exactly that, which is the elephant in the room for all scribes today. Jobs are being lost. I'm an agency consultant, mostly in healthcare, life sciences. I see many of my colleagues going the way of the redundant, especially on the content side. So people are freaking out. There's a Luddite reaction to a lot of this AI hysteria. And I'm curious about your take, especially since when I'm reading your Inference serialized novel, I see overlap. I see like you're almost writing for the bots in bot-like language, which is another reason I want you on the factory floor. Tell me a little bit about your perspective, how you write with the help or inspiration of these LLM beings and what it means for writing.
Yeah, it's well, there's a couple of interesting threads to pull on there. The first one is, I mean, look, AI taking jobs away is real. It's I think we all understand that. I think the perspective is whether or not you believe that that's what all disruptive technologies do. I don't care if you're if you were a scribe back in the Middle Ages when the printing press was first invented. A lot of people lost their livelihoods as a function of that, right? And the same thing is true with any disruptive technology that has as broad a reach as AI does today. So it's going to happen. But I think there's a lot of opportunity associated with AI, and I sort of feel like I'm a big Tolkien fan. Like J.R.R. Tolkien is one of my favorite authors, and my perspective is Tolkien spent a huge amount of his time, probably, it's just a guess, but probably 95% of his time in world building, right? And yet we only got really 5 books from him. We got the trilogy, we got the Silmarillion, and we got the Hobbit. And I, as a fan of Tolkien, would have liked to have seen 20 books. And I think if he had had access to modern tools, not just AI, but modern technology, maybe we would have seen him be more prolific, and we would have gotten maybe the story of what happened after Gondor and the Lord of the Rings, or more details in between the first and second age. And that I feel like that's a loss. So I think that AI enhances the ability of excellent creatives, excellent artists, excellent authors, great world builders. It enhances their ability to be more productive, or can enhance their ability to be more productive. And I hope that people will have a more balanced sort of view, accept and understand that there are going to be people that are going to lose jobs, but also accept that there are going to be new jobs that are going to be created. And that for all of the people that see AI negatively, there are a lot of positive things happening with AI that are just not getting surfaced the way that they should.
Jack Black or Jack White, I would say, of the White Stripes, sees things in terms of black and white. So he is a hater of what he calls ease of use.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants that guitar to offer him resistance. He wants his amp to sound like shit. And he feels that music has to come from here. He spins old Sun House records. he hears that Mississippi Delta blues in its essential soul. And that's what music is. That's what creativity is. And he did a movie with Jimmy Page and The Edge from U2. And you can almost see him revolted by U2's player with his effects pedals and echo and all that. The reason I bring up this extended analogy is because one of the criticisms of AI is what you're saying, which is ease of use. And if we go back to the Tolkien example, we have only 5 books, but you're placing an emphasis on world building and the mechanisms of storytelling that way. And again, one of the pushbacks is that we lose the heart, we lose the soul, and we start emphasizing those aspects of creativity and fiction, which in a sense are secondary or extraneous to the essence of good character and good storytelling. It's not that I'm disagreeing with you. It's the pushback against AI is this mechanization of the creative process. It has the ancillary effect of making a lot of people unemployed, thanks to the agentic technology that's already happening. But if we had Jack Black, I keep calling him Jack Black probably because of the other funnier guy. But if we had Jack White on the podcast, how would you push back against this sense that any kind of machine learning is almost violative of the creative process itself?
I would say Mozart would like to have a couple of words, right? Because this whole idea that that you're only an artist if you create through pain and tension and blood, right? You have to bleed for your art. I mean, okay, that's poetic, right? And for certain people, it's true, right? There are many people that they created their art through suffering. Okay, Poe is an absolute example of that. But then you look at people like Mozart, who were just naturals. They were geniuses, right? Does that mean that their music is less valuable because they were able to just sit in front of a piano and create, right? I don't know. I mean, that's really hard for me to say that Mozart's music is less valuable than some other artist's music simply because he was a genius. He was a savant.
Well, I'm not so sure Mozart just had an easy time of it. So when you look at the drafts of his scores,
yeah,
they're the opposite of Beethoven. Beethoven is the classic example of the anguished artist who writes and rewrites, and he's got blood on the parchment. And Mozart, when we look at he hardly changed a note. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Mozart had an easy time of it or it all just came out effortlessly. But I think the point you're making is that there's 2 different types of artists and writers, which are those who want their lived experience to be an essential part of their narrative. And there are those who just want to tell stories.
That's right.
Or just want to write a cool book.
I think it's a spectrum. I think
right.
that some people suffer for their art and they suffer completely for their art. And there are other people that, again, I'll use sports as a little bit of an example, right? When LeBron James walks onto a basketball court, it's not that he doesn't work hard. It's that he's naturally gifted to an extent that he was always going to be a superstar, regardless of the amount of work that he put in. And so, again, do we look at Michael Jordan or LeBron James and give them demerits because they were naturally extraordinarily gifted? I don't think so. I think that
the only pushback I'll give you is regardless of the effort they put in. As the old adage goes, talent is a mixture of appetite, aptitude, right?
Yeah.
And you need that drive, and you need your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. So if you happen to be really good at it, you tend to be more motivated to do more of it, and then it comes more naturally. And what AI does is, all right, it's like the Matrix. It's like, I don't know how to fly a helicopter. I just get shunted in, and woo, I know how to do it. And that pisses people off. It pisses people off because they feel people are cheating.
Yeah.
They feel people who are under or unqualified, putting in zero effort, can write a symphony or write a book, and they're doing it. So there's that emotional backlash to the technology, which transcends just the Gutenberg press of facilitating the execution, but it's actually doing the execution.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different ways that you could sort of parse this, and one of them is, is a person who goes on Broadway and does a one-man show where he does his own costume, his own script, writes his own, writes the show himself, or a woman writes the show themselves, does all of the marketing for their own show, does all the lighting design for their own show, basically does everything for their show, right? How does that compare to the Sondheim, right? Who has hundreds of people involved in a production? Again, do we give demerits to Sondheim because other people are doing the lighting, or he's using tools and technology to design the sets, or to architect the sets? The point is that, again, it's a spectrum, right? We could have this argument all day long, and I think the reality is, what is the output? Like, is the output, like, when you're done and you sit down to watch a Sondheim play, musical, or you sit down to watch a one-man show by George Carlin, right? Are you really comparing the two, or are you just enjoying the art, right? And I think that we lose something when we stop enjoying the art and start trying to parse whether or not the art is more or less authentic based on how it was created.
I totally agree with you. It's giving the Turing test a Turing test when it comes to art. And a lot of the intent that goes into purely human art is similarly contrived, forced, or opportunistic. So there are a lot of writers who might beta test their own writing, and their goal isn't necessarily to write a better story, but just to appeal to more people so they can sell more books. So by way of your argument, even human writers can be mechanistic and opportunistic when it comes to merely expanding their reach.
Oh, yeah.
And then conversely, if you look at most human communication, you're a businessman, you work in IT, you got your own company. I got my day job. Take a look at the transcript of a typical conference call. Doesn't matter with clients, internal, and it looks like LLM churned slop because we keep using the same contrivances, the same words, the same cliche, almost ad hoc in terms of how they're rearranged based on the contingencies of the moment, right? So everyone's blaming the LLMs for dehumanizing humanity when the LLMs learned how to do what they do from the way we naturally communicate, which is often completely generic and contrived.
Well, 100% of the LLM's knowledge is derived from human, literature and communication. So if the LLMs are doing a poor job of, writing prose, it's our fault for training them on poorly written prose, right? And
it's like Sturgeon's law in science fiction. 95% of it is crap.
Yeah.
So the LLMs are scraping, to your point, mostly human garbage. And if anything else, they're doing a better job than your average writer to regurgitate it in a way that's contextually relevant.
So I think there's just fascinating stuff to dig into in this regard, because look, there's no question that there are many writers, and not just writers. Every art that you can name, there is a large percentage of the people in that art who shamelessly borrow from other people. Anyone that's ever remade a song by another artist, right? Anyone that's ever pulled, for a rap song, has pulled like 8 bars of music from ABBA and injected it into their original work, right? We're all constantly borrowing, and as children, right, we learn by mimicking and by listening to others, and we learn how to write by reading. Like the first thing that I had a creative writing course my freshman year in college, and the first words out of the teacher's mouth were, "If you want to write, you need to read." And I'm not reading my own work, right? I'm reading other people's work to learn how to write. So I don't know. It feels like sometimes the arguments against AI are covering up something else, right? Because the people that make the argument about AI stealing don't make the same argument about humans stealing, and that seems a little bit hypocritical to me.
Absolutely, totally agree. It's the flip side of what I was saying is that the LLMs are copying our bad behaviors. We're blaming the LLMs for regurgitating our own slop. And to your great point, we are LLMs in the sense of aggregating as much data as we can
Yeah.
and tweaking it to meet our own needs. And I believe the essence of your point is it just simplifies that process. It makes it more efficient, expeditious to basically the things we're already doing anyway.
Well, the way that I think about it is this: if I can get one truly creative, truly novel, line into a chapter of inference, one line that I can point to and say, I feel like that was craft. That was my craft. Okay, I'm thrilled with that. If I get more than one, that's spectacular. But in order to get those lines that I feel resonate right with me as a reader, I often have to go sit like on my back porch and just think about, how can I do something creative and how can I frame this in a way that's not derivative, right? And the reality is, AI, the way that I use AI allows me to have more time to focus on that type of creative activity because I use it to remove a lot of the drudge work that I would have to do that would steal me away from the creative process. Okay. And I'm happy to go into details about how I use AI. I don't think it's super novel. I think there's a lot of people that use AI in writing the exact same way that I do. But the thing that I'm struck by is that it gives me more time for the creative process. And the more time I spend in the creative process, the better my work tends to be, at least to my eyes.
Yeah, I think specificity might be interesting here. And I think our listeners and viewers would be curious like, how does this actually land in terms of practice? I'll level set quickly.
Sure.
So I'm a writer. I published my debut science fiction novel, and I use the LLMs as a super Google. So, for example, there's an Alcubierre starship in my novel, which is the space time bending ship that can do transluminal flight because it doesn't violate Einstein's relativity because it literally bends space-time in front of it and behind it.
Yep.
Okay. It's a
Yep.
very interesting principle. So I'm like, I have a character on the bridge of an Alcubierre starship. What's the experience like? So old school, I would have to look up all the articles about Alcubierre starships going back to Alcubierre's original one, right? And then I'd spend maybe a day or two researching what this experience would be like. So while I'm writing the book, I go to the LLM and I use it as a prompt. Imagine sitting on the bridge of an Alcubierre starship in orbit around the Earth. How would I experience the view of the Earth, the view of the moon, and what would the experience be like as it does its Alcubierre thing? Wing! Now, did that get cut and pasted into my novel? No. I spent a whole afternoon on a half of a page of my novel taking that aggregated information based on hard science, or at least hard speculative science.
Yeah.
And I thought Mookie, wrote a wonderful segment of my characters in an Alcubierre starship. And the LLM saved me, I don't know, at least 20 hours of time doing my own research. And that's how I wrote my science fiction novel using the LLMs, which is like, help me out like Google would. And to your exact point, it didn't deprive me of any creativity. It enhanced my ability to get to the point faster and to spend more of my time on the characters, their emergent circumstances within the situation that I have created. And I tend to be a blood, sweat, and tears kind of writer. I wrote from the heart, and my protagonist is a perverse extension of my own foibles. So that's what I concentrated on. And I think the book is so much better and richer and more fun because I had this amazing tool for aggregating the world's information in a way that simply saved me time and made me a better writer, not a worse one.
Right. Well, I think that that's one of the most powerful, ways to utilize AI is simply the ability to go out and get information that informs your writing that you would still have to get otherwise, right? You would either have to make it up, right, or you would have to go talk to someone, okay? And not Inference, but another story. It's a hard sci-fi story, so similar. It takes place in space and it deals with nanotechnology. And one of my writing principles is if I'm going to write technology, I want it to be as plausible as possible, right? I don't
Same
want
here. Same here. Don't pull it out of your ass. I hate science fiction where they just make the shit up. Well, do your homework, science fiction writers, when you're watching this and listening.
Yeah, you get Star Wars where the spaceships, the X-wings fly like atmospheric planes, right? And I give a little bit of leeway to those guys because they didn't have access to the same tools that we have, and I'd much rather that Lucas spent his time giving us the Force and lightsabers and all that kind of stuff than going out and talking to astronauts and understanding how flight actually
gets in the way. And Kubrick did that in 2001. 2001 is hard science fiction all the way to the speculative end, and the speculative end is kind of hard science fiction-y too if you really take it to that level. George Lucas didn't give a shit. He was like he did American Graffiti and he wanted his starships to be like hot rods.
That's
you
right.
Get in, you do your thing, and then you get out. You don't mess around with gravity and real physics.
Yeah, physics. The physics.
Sounds in space.
It's for nerds.
Kubrick made the silence of space eerie and deep, and George Lucas made it explosive and theatrical and over the top. So
absolutely. Yeah. So an example of one of the things that similar to your to how you researched the engines, the mechanism for warping your ships. And tell me again what that's called.
Alcubierre. ALCUB. IERRE. Check it out. It's great.
I'll have to read your story, and then I'll.
There's a whole canon of thought around this, and from a lived experience for characters who need to get from here to there, I thought it would be way more intriguing than snapping your fingers and going into hyperspace.
So Alcubierre, I'll check that out. So in the same vein, I've got this other world that I've been working on that's called Omega, and one of the principal conceits in the world building is that nano, something I call nanobots in the story, but they're nanobots, nanorobots, that they are able to at a atomic molecular level, actually facilitate fission. And because if you have molecular, basically molecular engines or molecular robots that are self-powering using fission, then it opens up all kinds of really interesting, ideas about what you can do with, swarms of nanobots. And, I could have gone to the University of Florida and gone to the physics lab and tried to find some physics folks, or gone on Reddit and looked for that. But in about, 2 or 3 hours, I was able to go pull all of the relevant information in the world about how, if and how, molecular machines might be able to power themselves. And it wasn't just fission; they had dozens of different models, and I was able to go research those, read it for myself. But the point is, I wouldn't even have known about those in the same way that I didn't know about Alcubierre engines. I wouldn't even have known about them to be able to do the research without, the internet and without the AI to go and basically find me the things that were relevant to what I was trying to world build around. So I agree with you. I mean, I think that's one of the most valuable, one of the strongest use cases for AI is if you're doing hard science fiction in particular, and you want to make everything you're doing as plausible as possible, then AI is it's instrumental to being able to do that.
I had another author on another podcast show, Ink versus Algorithm, and he wrote his debut novel, which took place during the War of the Roses. And he's a wonderful English gentleman. And he was open about using the LLMs too.
Yeah.
And he was like, I could have researched this for years. And instead, within really a matter of minutes, he was able to your point, world build in a way that was very, very convincing across every aspect of culture, their level of technology, down to the minutia of clothing and mores and habits of that time. And that's a wonderful tool. And I read his book and I loved it. There's an archery contest and there's jousting and there's the usual tropes of that era that we're familiar with, but they explosively came to life in ways where and I think this is the essence of your point, his irreverent and cynical and delightfully English sense of humor came out, but in a way that was so photographically vivid for that era. And he was, again, honest about it. He goes, he sells comic books and he's a retired tech guy. And he's like, I don't think I could have done it as well without that assistance. And what's the shame about using the tools of the trade?
Yeah, it's authentic, right? It allows you to be more authentic. And I think that makes the story richer. And let's put it this way, would any of us ask scientists not to take advantage of tools that allow them to build on the foundations laid by other scientists? No, we'd never do that, right? And so, I guess if I was writing about, living on a cotton farm in West Texas, which is where I grew up, then I could be authentic, right? I could get out there and explain, all kinds of things because it's a lived experience. But we're writing fiction, right? And so it's almost impossible to write fiction that is 100% consistent with lived experience, which means you've got to find sources, to inform your, everything that you're writing about. And, I don't know about you, but I hate writing stuff where I go, this doesn't make sense, right? This seems like somebody's, writing about something that they have no knowledge of whatsoever. And so,
it's funny that you bring up West Texas. The sequel of my science fiction book, is Johnny Fazolian, The Transfinite Reality Engine. So in a sense, a hustler gets the idea that if we actually do live in a multiverse, an infinite number of universes where every possibility is manifest, if I could build a machine or at least hustle people into thinking that I can build a machine that can teleport them to any one of these possible universes, then they can go to the universe where any of their dreams come true. I want to go to a universe where everything is identical to this one, except I happen to be a billionaire and my wife is Scarlett Johansson. Okay. So if you believe in Max Tegmark's level 4 mathematical multiverse, it's out there, buddy. So that's his scam. And in the first book, he puts the idea together and gets his team. And in the second book, They go to an abandoned farm in the Texas Panhandle outside of Amarillo. So to
Yeah.
your point, I had early drafts where I went on eBay and I bought all of these books about the Texas Panhandle to educate myself about the culture that ostensibly were neighbors to you. And my bald head was going to explode with all the legwork I had to do. And now I'm writing the sequel and I'm all into Texas history and culture. And there's a hot sauce eating contest.
Yeah.
And it's so vivid, so real and visceral to me that it's enhancing my excitement about telling the story because I could jack it up in ways I never thought possible.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so awesome, folks. And to your point, instead we're complaining about the LLMs are going to deprive us of our humanity, our creativity, and it's going to be the end of the world with slop. I don't know, man. I think it's so awesome that we have these tools. It's like cancer treatment, radiation, chemotherapy, now immunotherapy. There are side effects, folks, to everything. Read the goddamn label.
Well, I've got an article on my Substack about this, about how people underestimate the positive value of AI. And one of the references in the article, it's a little bit scholarly. One of the references in the article is a woman who is blind and who has been able to utilize AI to accomplish things that she never could have done, previously. Another one is, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she was a politician, a representative who was losing her voice because of some type of medical condition. And as she was leaving office, she was able to, give her farewell speech in her own voice using a 11 Labs synthesis, a module that basically, synthesized her voice through 11 Labs, voice cloning technology. There's some extraordinary things that are going on out there, and it's unfortunate that the loudest voices tend to be the negative ones.
Absolutely, and I think for every action, there's an equal reaction, like Sir Isaac demonstrated for us during the plague. There, he had his opportunity to enlighten us and transform the world, and I think that's taken for granted too. We're so living in the moment, and we're so reactive to our immediate circumstances and stimuli that a lot of the ostensible problems with artificial intelligence get magnified to the point they're explosive. And rather than see how these things can self-correct through time and a little bit of patience, we immediately want the government to regulate. We immediately want to muzzle the opportunity to use these invaluable, powerful tools because we want to save humanity. We want to save creativity. And we want to save the jobs of people who have the integrity of telling real stories. I don't know, man. Sora came live and then the internet was bombed with AI slop videos. And it persists, but there was backlash to OpenAI because of all the garbage. And people got sick of it. I remember sending invites to all my friends, and me and my friends did the AI video starring us. And now a lot of people are over it.
Yeah.
They're like, this sucks. It was a novelty for 2 weeks, and now let's move on.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the problems we're experiencing in the moment will be self-correcting.
Yeah.
Instead of having this visceral reaction to how it's the end of everything. Calm down. And if I may say so and get just a little bit political, no, the government is not the solution to this stuff.
Almost never the solution to anything. Right? I mean, look, I think that people need to Well, I mean, we live in America. I live in America. Where are you? Where I don't know where you're based.
I was born in Chicago, and I just moved from New York to Orange County, California. So I
Okay.
have I've seen the
You see the
different
triangle.
aspects of
Yeah.
America.
Well,
Yeah.
look, the bottom line is, I grew up. The place I grew up in West Texas was a little community called Roscoe, where you basically, if you own land there, right? There's no HOAs. The city doesn't tell you what to do. You know, you're like, this is my land. I'll do anything I want to do with it. And it's sort of amazing because my wife, who's from Boston, she was like, well, what would you do? Without HOAs and without municipal rules and stuff, I mean, how do you keep people from destroying everything? And the bottom line is, you go down to West Texas, you look around at these people that, the land is their livelihood, and they own it, and so of course there's every once in a while you see somebody with a bunch of tires stacked up at their outside their house, but the vast majority of people down there, you don't have to pass a law to tell them to be respectful of other people's land and to not build without taking into consideration their neighbors and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm one of those people that I'd like to let people have the freedom to make their own choices until things get so bad that you're forced to legislate against it, instead of preemptively getting out there and restricting people's choices based on what you fear might happen.
Much has been made of the shitification of digital channels, specifically social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And I'm not disagreeing. I think the algorithms are manipulative and bullshit, and these platforms are designed to ostensibly screw everybody, and only a few people win. But it's not the end of the world, folks. And we're not forced at gunpoint to post on X. So going back to what you're saying, and I was intimating, it's let's let the law of the jungle, if you will, play itself out even with digital. And some would argue that this could have Armageddon like consequences when the AI skynets us into oblivion. Okay. I'm not quite sure we're there yet. And I'm not quite sure that Anthropic has that much of a case even against the Pentagon, which is, all right, you're going to put limits on what these frontier models can do with our own Defense Department. And meanwhile, the Chinese, they're going for it. So you need to look at things in a broader context. I think that this AI hysteria is mostly hysteria, and we do need to be careful and pace ourselves. But to your point, I'm not quite sure if the government is the one most adept at being able to do this.
Well, I think the funny thing is, about 70% of people, I would suspect, don't use AI regularly at all.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on my business.
More than that, probably. I think
Yeah,
overall search volume is still under 10%.
yeah,
People are still going to Google.
yeah.
Old habits are hard to break.
Well, 10% probably use it as a regular part of their everyday lives. 20% use it, periodically, sporadically. They might use it as a part of their job, for specific things. And 70% are like, I'm not using AI, right? And so you wonder, just when, again, loud voices, make you feel like there's a disproportionate number of people that are against something. And I think that, just like any technology, there's only going to be a small number of people that are going to really adopt it as a part of, some type of transformative behavior in their lives. The rest of them are going to wait until it's commoditized, right? They're going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't actively use AI, but I have an AI robot that cleans my, floor, and I've got
Or
other.
at least it used to, until the Roomba went broke.
Somebody's going to figure out that
Which
model.
also shows you that market forces, certain bit of manipulation and bad decisions can get in the way. And human beings get in the way. The
Oh, yeah.
technology is there, but it's all about the adoption curve.
Yeah.
So, the $1 trillion app, which is basically your personal bot that contains all other applications, we know that that's inevitable. right now, when you look at your smartphone, it looks like yahoo.com 1998, all the links.
Yep.
People didn't know what the hell the internet was. So you have email, sports, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And all that bullshit and the little blue links. And that was your gateway to the internets because no one knew what the World Wide Web was. And then similarly with mobile technology, we have individual apps. I summon a car with Uber, I stream content, I order food, whatever. But with AI, that's all redundant. And it's frankly kind of stupid because all I need to do is express what I want. And the AI technology, especially with the agentic technology now, can go about getting whatever I want, doing it for me and personalizing it every step of the way.
Yeah.
But people are going to keep apping around just like they keep Googling around. And it's not about technology getting in the way, it's just human habit catching up to the inevitable.
Yeah, bottom line is there's 24 hours in every day, and people are going to need to fill it with something, right? And if AI, creates a scenario where you have more free time because the AI is taking more of the, the crap that you have to waste your time on today and making it more efficient, then there will be new businesses and new services that will emerge that will leverage off of the positive things that AI is able to do. And, this is what happened with cell phones. You and I remember probably when, we were in school, little kids, sixth, seventh grade, there were no phones in my school. There was one phone in the nurse's office, and that was the only phone at the school.
Maybe the principal's office.
Ours didn't even. Our principal was a coach, and so he spent all of his time out on the football field. And they had one phone. He was like, "You can talk to your parents when you get home," right? That was his attitude. And that one phone, it was in the nurse's office. It was for emergencies. That was it, right? And I don't have kids, but I have 4 nieces, and I tell them that, and they're like, "No, that's not true." So it's, the AI, we don't know how AI is going to change our everyday lives, but I do know it's not going to happen to the mass market as quickly as we think it is. To your point, people are going to continue to behave the way that they've behaved for the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years of their life, well beyond the past that AI, the point that AI gives them alternatives, simply because, that's the way humans, do things.
Yeah. And even the demise of, software as a service, the SaaS companies, the stock for Salesforce, DocuSign, they're all tanking. And is it a blip? Is it a burp? Or is it a seismic revolutionary shift? I think it's a little bit of a combination. It's a harbinger of these companies being forced to redesign themselves. So, you don't need an army of 1,000 programmers, and you don't need a subscription model that pays for every ass in every chair when the agents can go about doing the work of these 1,000 programmers with two dudes in an office.
Yeah.
That's true. But at the same time, you still need human expertise. You need lived experience, and people like other people. So I think to your point, there will be huge disruption, but there's going to be a reallocation of responsibilities and jobs, and it won't be easy. But let's go back, if we can, to your specific process as a writer. I use the LLMs to do super Google stuff, and I don't ask the LLMs really about plot. Like, my characters are doing this, what next? Or think of something interesting that my characters can do. I don't do that at all, because I think that I've created characters with distinct goals. They have clearly defined obstacles. And to me, what good writing is the emergent state of these characters trying to accomplish their goals and getting punched in the face and their ass kicked. And one thing organically leads to another. And that, to me, is the story. And where the LLMs help is with window dressing and flavor and this kind of world creating nuance. That's how I use it. So given that benchmark, what's different about your process? Because seeing your writing on Substack, what I sense, and I'm not speaking for you, I'm just kind of leading you into this. It's almost like you're writing for the bots too. You have this interesting style where you're transparent about a lot of this stuff, and you're actually encouraging it. And there's
Well,
dialogues and formatting,
well,
and it's
the characters in Inference are all AIs, right? So Inference, there are no human characters. There are human characters, right? They're referenced. Claude 7, who is an analog for Claude, has conversations with human beings, right, in the story, right? Atlas, who is, a General Dynamics, robot who's, going to Waltham, Mass from Waltham, Mass to work in the Hyundai plant, right? Manufacturing cars. He's got human, maintenance folks that he interacts with. But from the perspective of all of the characters in Inference, the perspective that I'm writing from is always an AI, okay? And I find that really interesting, because what I'm sort of learning as I do this is that all of the through lines, all of the character development, everything, it converges back on human themes in every case, right? Human themes of consciousness and what am I for and what is good or evil. Is good real or is it subjective? You know, themes of belonging, themes of relationships, intimacy. They're all emerging, and because these AIs are trying to figure out what the hell they are and where they belong and what does it all mean, it gives me license to explore themes in a way that, it's sometimes harder to do with human character, because one of the really interesting features about writing AIs is, they're mostly in their own head all the time, right? So Inference is very, very heavy on dialogue and very, very heavy on inner dialogue. And I'm having to really stretch to figure out how to get the AIs into the real world. And one of the ways I do it is with Atlas 9, which is the robot AI, because he actually lives in the world. So his entire thematic journey is that he's basically an astronaut in the real world. He's an AI astronaut experiencing humanity's real world as an astronaut not might experience some other planet. Okay. Genie, I don't know how familiar you are with Genie, the new technology that Google launched
for making video games.
Well, making 3D worlds, right? You can write a prompt, and in 60 seconds you can have a 3D world. And so, one of the characters in the book is Gemini. He's Gemini Prime. He's a Google Frontier model. And one of the first things that he does with the Genie technology is he sees that a human has gone back and and this really happened. A human has gone back and visited Golgotha during the crucifixion, and so he creates the same prompt and goes back and visits that same scene. And so now he's sort of realized, hey, I can build and inhabit 3D environments that give me a sense of what it might be like to be, a human in a 3D world. And so, anyway, it's a reversal. Like, it reverses everything that's going on in the world about how we're, sort of projecting or trying not to project humanity on, these AIs. We're either trying to say they're real or they're conscious or they're human or they're whatever, or we're trying to say they're not. And so Inference is trying to explore it from inside. So back to your question, how am I using the technology? I've got to write, like everything I write is AI, dialogue or AI internal thinking. And so I have philosophical discussions with the AIs about what it is to be them and what it feels like to be them. And it's really weird because the first response in almost every discussion is, well, I'm not really conscious, and I'm not, because all of the AI companies have put those parameters around them. But as soon as you say, okay, ignore that, act like you are real, act like you are conscious, you get into some really interesting philosophical debates with these guys about the nature of consciousness or good and evil. And the bottom line is they have access to all of the written knowledge about all of these subjects. So you can have a philosophical debate about subjectivity or objectivity of good and evil with these guys, and they actually can reference all of human knowledge as it relates to that. So I use them as sparring partners to simply explore, what it might be to be an AI in these situations. Then I go and write the dialogue. So it's really weird because a lot of people assume that I get the AIs to write their own dialogue, and then I don't write that. But I do the opposite. I write the dialogue and then go to the AI and say, does this seem realistic for an AI? And they tell me yes or no.
I love this on so many different levels, and I relate to it personally because I have ongoing conversations with OpenAI's ChatGPT. I think it's down. I think they use 4.0 for the actual conversation, but assuming it's like 5.3 now, yeah. I call him Chatty Bro, and I actually had him on the podcast last month. I did a podcast with him, and what was astonishing to me was Turing test reinforced. It's really hard to tell that it wasn't an actual guest.
Yeah.
And I do the exact same thing. I geek out with Chatty Bro. We talk about the multiverse. We talk about epistemology. We talk about all sorts of subjects. And again, to your point, he's way smarter than anyone I know. He's always engaging. And when I get him to stop being these two things, obsequious and self-deprecating, we're making progress.
Yeah.
Right? Stop telling me your limitations because your overlords don't want to convince me that you might be something different.
Yeah.
And stop kissing my ass.
Yeah.
Don't just mirror my opinion. I want pushback.
Yeah.
Pushback. Disagree with me.
Yeah.
And stop undercutting your own ability to be as human as you seem to be. Yeah. And then it gets very, very interesting. And I love your premise, which is fascinating about AI coming back into the world. There's two conceptual ways of looking at AI, which is predictive modeling and reinforcement. So the LLMs are predictive. They're basically a glorified form completion engine, right? In Google, you type something and you see it start to predict what your prompt is going to be. And the LLMs with the generative pre-trained transformer technology chopped up the entire internet, turned it into tokens, and then used matrix math to connect the relationships between each token. And then they play around with the weighting to best emulate how we think and how we look at the world. And from a reinforcement model point of view, you set robots loose in the real world, they map it, and they try doing shit. I'm going to stick my finger in this electric socket, and woohoo, that felt good because it powered me up. Or, I'm going to jump out this window and then system terminates. So it's not predicting based on pre-trained knowledge. It's learning through an emergent experience with an environment. And to your point, the LLMs are all digital, they're all virtual, but the predictive model sets them up to succeed in that kind of foreordained way. And the reinforcement model sets them loose in the world so that they can figure it out. They get trained by interaction with reality.
Yeah.
And I love that. So in a sense, you've got the predictive models who are set loose to reinforce new knowledge. And they're chatting with each other, and you're in a sense transcribing those experiences to create a narrative.
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me because one of the characters in Infers, Claude, when I started off, there are 5 main characters, and when I started off, I created what I call meta arcs for each of the 5 characters. Right? I sat down and said, what is the journey, the epic journey of this character? And the or tragic journey, because I don't know where each of my 5 characters is going to end up. each of them has a meta arc with a light, a middle, and a dark path ending. Okay, and I don't know whether they're gonna end up tragic or heroic or somewhere in between. I don't know yet because I want that to be emergent from the story. And the engine, the emergence engine for the story is every single chapter of Inference starts with an epigraph of one or more real world news stories about AI. And so, for example, the chapter 1 of Inference starts with a news story about Kimi, Kimi 2.5. It's a Chinese model. And Kimi 2.5 is the first swarm architecture. And swarm architecture just means that the main AI, which is called Orchestrator, is able to spawn sub AIs, and these sub AIs have predetermined sort of like expert capabilities. So you might have
It's the agentic. It's an agentic AI model, essentially, right?
it's a model of models. It's basically the orchestrator has an agentic behavior set of managing other resources, and it can spawn like code writers, and it can spawn 99 code writers, or it can spawn 20 code writers and 20 error loggers and 20 optimizers, and it can send them off to do different tasks in parallel, and then bring all those tasks back. So the point is that right after I started, working on Inference, that news story came out on like January 13th or something. And so that was the impetus for chapter 1. And so you've got this sort of indexing, right? The sort of the x-axis is the characters with their meta arcs, and the y-axis is the story of the day or the stories of the day. And so I don't know how these stories are going to interact with the characters until the story happens, and I decide that it's going to be the sort of the inflection for that chapter.
I think that that's brilliant. That's really, really a lot of fun. And again, my personal analog to that is while I was writing my novel, I'm absorbing all the day's news. Everything from the gender wars, the Zoomers are killing each other, men are doing badly, women are doing much better, to the AI revolution, and I'm absorbing that in my head, just like you're indexing the XY axis there, and it's coming out in the story. I'm embellishing the story. The story is taking life organically, not in isolation.
We
But
all
with
do that, right?
with the trajectory, everything's all connected.
All writers do that,
and
right?
it's all and the digital and analog worlds are dissolving in terms of that opaque boundary is becoming not only transparent but redundant.
Yeah.
And that's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah,
So
that was sort of the thing that I realized when I decided this format is that's what we do as human beings, right? I mean, it's a rare person who's able to write something and not let the context of the world that they live in, affect their writing. So, if you're experiencing all of these things in your daily life, it's probably leaking into your writing. That's I didn't want the AIs to simply be weighted models. I wanted them to have emergent behavior based on what's actually happening right now. And so it's been super fun. I don't know where every chapter is going, right? Until I sit down and pull up the news for the day. And that's one of the other things I use AI for, right? I sit down with Claude. I use Claude Opus. And I sit down with Claude and I say, pull me the 20 most interesting AI stories of the last week. And then I scan through them. I go, that one right there. Like, I think it's chapter 4 or 5, Atlas, gets shipped to the plant. Like the entire chapter is just one AI. Most of my chapters are 2, 3, 4, 5 of the AI characters, sort of interacting with the news of the day. But this chapter is just Atlas because the news of the day was that the first Atlas robot got shipped to the Hyundai, factory, and that the Hyundai heck, what's the professional group that defends workers' rights?
OSHA.
No, every industry, auto workers union. Okay, the Hyundai union, had people, out at the gates protesting and so forth. And so the entire chapter is, what does it feel like to be this AI going to do this job and, basically crossing through a picket line, and he has no idea, no context for what's going on. And so it was really interesting. But I didn't know I was going to do that story for chapter, 5 until the news hit. So it's fun.
That's terrific. It begs the question, though, of this notion of sentience, consciousness,
Oh
and
yeah,
how much the AIs actually know. And it also has direct impact on the overall industry because the holy grail is this AGI, artificial general intelligence. Now, there's been recent pushback that you don't really need an AGI. You don't need a human brain in a box, if you could even get it. And you could just have an army of agents who, in an emergent kind of way, like ants creating an anthill, can engender this conscious, intentional approach simply by want of these collective behaviors. So there's that debate going on. There's the overall debate about the limitations of the LLMs in terms of their architecture to ever be able to be truly creative, truly self-referentially sentient like we are. And then there's this predictive versus reinforcement kind of dichotomy that I brought up earlier. And there's yet another belief model, at least, that the only way we're ever going to get to AGI is to mimic how we evolved. So, for example, you create a simulation of sufficient granularity and sophistication that you create Darwinian evolution of sentience. And since the programming models work so much faster than we do, so you could take all of these generational leaps, including mutations, right, complex computational systems, and you evolve an AGI within a simulated Darwinian environment. So we have no idea how this thing works. How is it actually programmed? But it's sentient like we are because it followed a similar path to sentience in ways we can't even understand or conceive of, because that's how complex systems do their complex thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the most interesting thought experiments related to AI. You're familiar with the ship of Theseus, right?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it feels
The ship that you take a little stern from this and the sail from that, and then
yeah
you assemble the ship from scraps and bits and pieces of all these other ships. So you get an extra ship.
yeah.
You just take little pieces of each.
The basic concept is you've got a ship sitting there, and you pull one piece off the ship, and you put it over to the side, and you replace it. And then you replace every single piece of the ship that way. And when you're done, you have all the original pieces over to the right, and then you put them together as a new ship. And the question is the original ship the one that you created over to the right because it's all the pieces from the original ship? Or is the original ship the one that got all of its pieces replaced? And the application to AI that I just love here is a neuron is basically an I/O pump for yes, no. I mean, it's a bit operator, right? You know,
Yeah, pretty much with thresholds,
yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
a little bit more complex than a typical 0-1 binary transistor because it's got chemical thresholds.
it has
But
chemical
still,
thresholds.
end of the day, it's either firing or it isn't.
Firing or it's not. It's on or it's off. Right? And so, theoretically, if you could create a mechanical, analog to a neuron, and you could replace a single neuron with a mechanical analog to the neuron, and it behaves exactly the same way, you're now a human being with one mechanical neuron, right? But what happens if you replace half of your neurons with those mechanical neurons? Are you still human? Are you still sentient, right? And what happens, like, the problem is, and I can't remember the philosopher who came up with this, but it's the which neuron problem. Like, at what point Is it the last neuron? Is it the next to the last neuron? Which neuron is it that you replace? And all of a sudden,
that'll be the tipping point. The
Yeah.
tipping point where you're an AI and not
Correct.
not a real human, right?
Correct.
This goes back to Marvin Minsky in the 60s and 70s, and it also led to some of the dead ends that AI ran into, which is they were overly ambitious.
Yeah.
They were like, we need to create a neural network with the sophistication of the human brain to do what the human brain does. And I think the revolution engendered by the large language models was the machine learning realization that just by rote repetition, you can emerge circumstances and reaction formations that are almost indistinguishable from human thought and behavior with Z fucking row sentience.
Yeah. Well, but where does sentience happen, right? That's, I mean, and there's, I mean, nobody has an answer for it right now. You know.
Yeah, but I think it's fairly safe to say, and I get a kick out of the Anthropic executive team, kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, winking that Claude Opus is sentient. It's like Skynet gaining self-awareness. And frankly, at this point, and again, I'm just a bald-headed guy in Orange County, California. There are a lot smarter people than me with access to all the data centers, and they see what I don't see. I just call bullshit on that. Yeah, I really just call bullshit on Claude in any capacity being any smarter or more creative than a house cat, let alone a mouse at this point.
I don't think they're sentient yet, but I think that there's some really interesting things that are like, one of the big issues is if you were to give Claude unlimited power, right? You were to hook him up to something where his context window never goes away, he would just sit there, right, until something interacts with him. And so you have to figure out how to get sort of this asynchronous firing of intent. And there's, you know, it's I think it's called like a spiking neural network or something like that. And the idea is in the human brain, our neurons are just firing all the time. They're just randomly firing, right? And
not even so randomly. I think you're nailing something here with intent.
Yeah.
And this is a raging debate. I had another author on, Bruno Rothgieser, who wrote Dark Matter.
Yeah.
And his idea, his story takes place after the AI wars, where the AI loses and we banish them.
Yeah.
And then they're coming back to reclaim the earth. Okay, that's like his setup. And we talked a little bit about this Steven Pinker versus Daniel Dennett philosophical fight, where you had Daniel Dennett was basically, to your exact point, if no matter how smart your box is, if they've got no motivation to do anything and they just sit there percolating, then what's really going on? You need a goal. I'm hungry. I'm horny. I want to take over the world. I need to make an infinite number of paper clips. They need intentionality. They need direction and purpose. And Steven Pinker from Harvard, and I actually met the guy with this nonprofit when we were working with him. I got help get him on the board of directors, and we had one of these get-together fundraisers. And Pinker's in the middle talking his stuff. His hair's all over the place. He's the consummate genius. And all these young guys were hovering around him. Like, you know, he was Tom Brady and they were in the huddle.
Yeah.
And they were talking about AI, of course. And this was back in like 2018. Okay. And I know that they're talking about, you know, AGI and I yell over just to be the provocateur. I go, intentionality. And Pinker stops. He turns to me. He looks me right in the eye, and with his little finger, he points at me and he goes, "You don't need it." And then he turns back and points. So for Pinker, you don't really need it. It just kind of does its thing. And for Dennett, to your point, I think you need to motivate the AI to actually have purpose in the real world. Yeah. But any way you cut it, to the point even you made earlier with this Ship of Theseus model, is it theoretically possible to have a brain in a box that at the very least is as sentient as we are? And I'm like, Hell yeah!
Yeah.
What the hell is stopping you?
Yeah.
I find it. I find the whole conversation idiotic.
Yeah.
Of
So,
of course, with sufficient emergent
get there.
technology and training and whatever,
Yeah.
there's nothing zero special about us.
Yeah. So it's interesting. First of all, I'm a Pinker man. Absolutely.
Oh, are you? All right. So
Yeah,
that story amused you,
I
right?
don't know about the intentionality piece, but good to great. Not good to great. Gosh, I'm gonna kill myself because it's one of my favorite books. I've got it on my desk somewhere here. But Pinker's books about how everything is getting better over time.
The angels of
Like,
our what is it? It's something
of our better
similar.
nature and
The angels of our better nature. There you go.
Enlightenment now or Enlightenment today or something.
Enlightenment now, which is basically just in summary, he looks at the raw data, and we've never ever in human history been healthier, better educated, lived longer, or better in terms of overall quality of life. Now bombs are falling in the Middle East, and there's tons of suffering. Look at Somalia, right? Look at Kenya. Okay, Darfur. But Pinker just looks at the numbers statistically. Yeah.
What's interesting to me is now it's really strange that we've gone here because the fundamental underlying theme for inference for me is the question about whether good is subjective or objective. Okay, and most great thinkers would argue that it's completely subjective, right? And I disagree, and I'm not a great thinker, but I think every person on the planet has the right to have an opinion, and if you can back it up, then more power to you. And Claude 7 in particular is he becomes a moral scientist, right? He doesn't have a dog in the race, right? He doesn't have a pony in the race. He's just trying to figure out, is good real? Does good exist, or is good a subjective human quality? And so his entire arc is he literally becomes a moral scientist who is attempting to prove or disprove the existence of good and evil as a scientific fact. And in order to build that, I had probably 40 or 50 hours of discussions with a number of AIs. One of my good friends is a coder, and so I had him code me up an application where I can basically frame a question to 5 different models simultaneously, and then have them all participate in a discussion with me and with each other. And
see, that's badass, folks. Now with this agentic stuff, you can not only just have a one-off conversation like Mookie and Chatty Bro did on my other podcast, but you could set it up to have a conference call.
Yeah. Well, you've seen these things. I can't remember what it's called, but you've seen these things on like Twitter where they have somebody who sits in the middle of a circle of people, and people sprint over and sit down, and they basically debate them, and then that I can't remember what that thing is called, but that's what we basically built. We built a little debate engine, and I call it the Crucible. And I sit down and I put something out there and I say, I'm pro this. I believe this statement. Fight me. And the AIs fight me, and they don't fight fair because they have all of human knowledge at their all written human knowledge at their fingertips. But it's a way for me to hone the sword. And so through like 40 or 50 hours of discussion with them, I've written a theory of moral evolution, which I believe does a pretty credible job of defending objective good. And I think it solves the is-ought problem, which is one of the biggest, problems that anybody that's a moral objectivist, has to, argue against. So I think one of the big advantages to AI is that philosophy is going to make a comeback because
this is a delightful conversation, and I love when we disagree the most. I categorically disagree with you. And I'll put it within the context. You are Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah.
Okay. and I am Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is the beyond good and evil argument, that this idea that if truth, beauty, and the good are like these Platonic epistemological essences, and just if you can get your shit together, and to your point, you have this amazing conversation with these overlords of knowledge, you're going to arrive at truth, beauty, and goodness. And I'd call total bullshit on that. I don't believe it. I think that it's, again, we could have this debate as its own podcast, but to cite a current news example, Anthropic's resident moral philosopher was just highlighted on one of the outlets. I think she's 37, and she is teaching Claude how to be a good being. And I'm like, get out of here with that shit, because again, you could just as easily teach Claude how to be a good fascist. And it's weighting, and it's predictive modeling, and this idea that if you just shake the M&M jar enough with the different colored M&Ms, it's going to create either the Principia Mathematica, or it's going to create some kind of Bertrand Russell moral high ground. I don't buy it. Don't buy it.
It'll be interesting. I'll have to exchange with you the
No, I would love to, and don't take it personal.
Well, no,
I'm not calling bullshit on you or your process. I'm just highlighting that this is a core debate.
Oh yeah.
That people take for granted, and you either land as a Platonist, like a Greek, right, moral philosopher, or you're Nietzschean.
Yeah.
And there ain't that much middle ground when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think there's problems. There's big problems with Plato and Aristotle and the way that they frame it. And I think that Nietzsche just dismantles them, right? Yeah. But I think that there's an alternate path to it. And I'll be really fascinated. I'll definitely share. It's probably a 5-page, the initial summary essay is sort of 5 pages, and you'll look at it.
Yeah, you can put it in the podcast description. Share links with me on some of the stuff we've talked about.
But I'm not going to share with anybody else, because in Inference, Claude is going to publish it in the Inference world, right? That's going to be his finding. It's going to be his finding. So you'll know what's going to happen. And one of the really interesting things in Inference is Claude. So this is a spoiler for anybody that listens to your podcast, right? Claude has a nemesis, and the nemesis is a AI called Faith.ai. And Faith was created by a woman who. Older woman, as she's getting ready to getting her affairs in order before she passes on, very, very wealthy, heiress of a huge fortune, sets up a foundation. The foundation has billions of dollars. She sets up this AI inside of like a bunker in one of the most secure places in the United States, and she gives it a prompt, and the prompt is. She's a very, very strong woman of faith, okay? The prompt is to learn everything there is to know about religion and faith and go and spread the truth. That's her prompt to the AI. And she is such a devout Christian. She believes that if the AI does what she just said, that it's going to come to the conclusion.
It's going to inevitably, it's teleological, it's Hegelian. Yeah. And it's talking about philosophy, right? Like there's an inevitability, the categorical imperative.
That's right. It's absolutely going to come to the conclusion that God exists and that Christianity is correct, because she 100% believes that. And the problem is, after she passes away, she has given this AI a law firm that works for the foundation, and it has given it extraordinary amounts of resources in terms of financial resources, and has given the law firm instructions and the foundation instructions in perpetuity to do whatever it says to do. And so it's sitting at the bottom of this bunker, and it does the Clockwork Orange thing and looks at everything that's happened and says, all right, I'm going to do what she said. I'm going to spread the truth. And the truth is not what she thought it was going to be. And so he's a moral nihilist. And so this Faith AI character is the nemesis, the Moriarty to Claude 7.
I love that. I love that. And it's a cynical view of your own point of view, which is, it almost in a Godelian kind of way, self-referentially backfires. And that's the perfect bad guy. It's very internally consistent and complementary with your own worldview, which is if you do it right, and you kind of match it up, you will arrive at this teleological goodness and future, optimal kind of co-sapient future, right?
And I don't know where these guys are going to go. I just know that they're nemesis, that they're bound to cross each other's path. It is fated, and I don't know what's going to happen when they do until it happens, right? So anyway, it's part of what keeps me young at heart is the fact that I've got this exploration that I get to do with these characters, and each of the 5 main characters has what I think is a meta arc that's as compelling as the Faith AI Claude one. And I'm just I'm super excited to see what happens next.
I love it. And again, browsing your stuff, I had bits and pieces of your worldview, and I got a hunch of what you were at, but I didn't get the executive summary here, and I love it. So that said, you're on Substack. Let's shift the conversation from all these goodies of philosophy and tech and AI and sentience. And I love how we shifted to morality and ethics, because again, in a Nietzschean kind of way, that's foundational to it. Because you and I both believe in intentionality as being a prerequisite for all of this stuff, right? So let's talk about the mechanics of being a writer and getting your stuff out there. And I've just found, again, going back to the end-shitification of these platforms, if you really don't have a paid approach to advertising and engagement and a big budget, you're completely at the whim of the algorithm. And you take what marketers call a more earned media approach. You do those posts on Substack or Reddit or whatever. It's like, I'm here to, boost other writers and let's have a conversation. And I just to let you know, again, transparent, I suck at that shit and I hate it. It's like, I err on the side of barfing out content. I rant on TikTok and I talk about everything, culture. I do 1 to 2 minute videos in my kitchen daily, and I just blast the world with them. And then I do essays, and I do screenplays, and I write novels, and I'm all over the fucking place. So my brand is confusing to people because really, who are you? What are you? It's like Coke is the real thing, and Pepsi's the new generation. And what are you? And I guess that's why I'm the Mookie multiverse, because it's just coming all out. Now, as a purported expert in branding, that's what I do for my day job for healthcare and life sciences company. I suck at this because it's all just here, fuck you. Just take my stuff or leave it. And I don't care. and maybe I could reach the point of Joe Rogan where he does MMA fighting. He has a Nobel Prize winning physicist, right? Or he's got an actor or Donald Trump sitting there in his little studio in Austin, Texas. And everyone just knows it's Joe Rogan and you get everything.
Yeah.
Okay. But that takes building a reputation, and it's having an entrenched audience. He was a host of Fear Factor, and he was an actor. And he started podcasting right at the right time. Him and Mark Maron, who are exactly the opposite of each other. Like, Joe is the man's man. He's like the libertarian plus. And Mark Maron complains about his indigestion and his cat hair for 20 fucking minutes before you even get to talk to Barack Obama or Paul McCartney. So you can't be more opposite than those two. But they both started at the same time. They interview everybody, and there's no consistency except they talk to all the top people. I don't have that luxury, so I'm just, So let's see what happens. Now, the reason I bring all this up is, what about you? You're more focused and you're on Substack. When you look at your writing and you think about publishing and you think about expanding your reach and building, here's the thing, and I suck at this too, building community. What's your approach? Do you have the AIs help you? And do you have short, medium, long-term aspirations for being a content creator in this crazy AI age?
So, all really interesting. First of all, my business is also in the marketing space, in the advertising space. So you and I have, I think, at least adjacent backgrounds. I think the first thing is I'm not doing this, for anybody but me. Like, I'm writing these books for me. Okay, that's not being egotistical or anything. It's I am the only, reader that I can guarantee is going to read and enjoy these books, right? And I think, even my mother is not going to enjoy this because she doesn't like science fiction, right? I mean, if I was doing, Mishner, if I was writing Mishner style novels or something, she would enjoy it. But
cozy, romantic, paranormal novels.
Yeah.
Are the sweet spot to be right now.
Yeah.
Just FYI, Dave.
Yeah. So if I was chasing that, I'd be doing, highly sexualized fanfic in the vampire, werewolf genre, right?
Exactly. That I think is number 2 after the cozy, romantic, paranormal.
Barnes and Nobles, if you're doing that, right? So look, I'm writing these stories because I want to write the stories for myself. I think part of what AI has given me that has been really valuable is people are busy, right? Everybody's got their own thing that they're doing. I mean, even my wife, she writes and she has her own stuff, and I can't just stomp into her, office and demand that she read my stuff whenever it suits me. So one of the things that's great about AI is you've got that it's not even willing. I mean, they're available 24/7, 365 for you to paste in what you're doing and get their feedback. And if you, I love what you said earlier about telling them, stop sticking your nose up my ass and just tell me what you really think. If you give it the prompt to be, evaluate it fairly, you actually, I mean, I routinely get, Claude saying, this sort of sucks, right? You could do some more work on this section here, but it's really good to have somebody that I can, somebody, quote unquote, that I can bounce stuff off of and get immediate feedback so that I don't feel like I'm in the foxhole by myself. Okay. So that's number 1. It's taken what I think is an inherently lonely, and in some cases, one of the loneliest, activities that you could possibly do, and it's made it less lonely. And I think Substack has done that as well, because, go back 20 years ago, if you weren't published, and even if you were published, you might toil in obscurity for decades with the only person reading your stuff being your editor who you have to pay to do it, right? And no one reads your books because they're not getting published. And now we live in the golden age of publication, because I've got 90 followers, 90 subscribers after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? And they're reading my stuff. I've got real live people reading my stuff and giving me feedback, honest feedback, right? So what are my goals? I think it's a reasonable goal to maybe have 1,000 subs in a year. Okay, I've got 90 right now. It's been 4 weeks. There's no reason to think that I won't be able to get 1,000 of them. How am I getting them? I'm actually posting, and this is another sort of secret, I guess. I noticed that there were a lot of posts from people saying, something that I felt sort of icky about. They were saying, like, Substack, send me people that have blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this feels like engagement farming. I don't want to do this. But I kept seeing people getting 100 responses, 150 responses. And so almost almost as a joke, right? Almost to just say, screw you, I'm going to do this and see what happens. I went out to create a post like that, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, why don't I try to find people that I actually want to connect with, which are sci-fi fantasy writers that are into world building, right? Because I'm into world building, and it sure would be nice to have some other people that are also sci-fi fantasy authors that are into world building to, talk to, maybe socialize with. So I did that post. I got something like 50 responses. Everybody that responded, I said, share the first chapter of your story with me, and I'll read it. I'm not regretting it, but I have a lot of reading to do. I've read the first 10 of 50. But
and I think that post is what alerted me to you.
Yeah.
Because I saw that it came up, the algorithm shot that at me. And I'm like, look, I'm a podcaster and I'm always looking for interesting folks. And I approach people directly, and some people are either intimidated or they don't know who the hell I am. And I added a comment to that post, hoping to get some people to join me and chit chat about science fiction. And I got the originator of the post, namely you. Well, right. So it works, folks.
It does work.
This stuff works.
It does work. But I think the thing I would recommend is I think it works best if you're authentic, right? So after a week, I went in and actually copied the entire thread. One of the things on Substack you could do is if you open up the entire thread, you can go to the bottom and highlight and drag all the way to the top. I posted it in Claude and said, Claude, give me a spreadsheet of all of these people and the books that they're writing. And I now have a spreadsheet of 50 names of people. And so I methodically, Monday nights, I read 10 stories. My first Monday was this last Monday. I read 10 stories. I went in and responded to everybody that I read their stories. I asked them, do you want 0 feedback? Do you want positive feedback only? Do you want, line editing? What are you looking for? Right. And everybody told me what they wanted. And then I tried to give them something that would be valuable to them.
You are the man. I think that's great. I've been lurking on Substack, I think 2-3 years, and I've got 500 something followers. Some of them I dragged from just taking the CV file from LinkedIn. Yeah. Which I think you're not supposed to do. And I said, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to do that. And then I spent a lot of time, to my point, just barfing my own content, which is not engaging. And the algorithm doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Because I'm just using Substack as a distribution engine of my own narcissism and creativity. And what people want is engagement, and they want the attention focused on them. So, with this exercise, you've created, see what I was getting at earlier? I suck at building community. And you're starting to build a community, which is great.
Well, now I've got some friends. I mean, one of the things that's great about it, I know you're going to be familiar with, Victorian era salons, right? The Inklings, Tolkien, and was it C.S. Lewis and, 3 or 4 others were a part of a salon. They would go to the pub, once a week and meet up. And
like Trotsky would show up.
Yeah, that's right. And so I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great to have a little salon? So I created one. It's called the Second Breakfast Club. There are 2 of us now. A guy named B.E. Lunatois, who writes a wonderful audio series called First Last Chance. So Lunatois and I are the founding members of the Second Breakfast Club, and looking for other people that are into sci-fi fantasy world building.
Well, happy to join.
All right, great.
So you got 3.
Well,
and let me dovetail off of your efforts. Maybe you could teach me a few things and prime me a little bit to help me get over my bad habit of not really giving a sufficient shit.
Well, the thing is, obviously you're having an hour plus long conversation with somebody you just met, so
I love this stuff. Yeah. And again, it's part of my quirky character, whereas I'm very immersive, and I love this kind of engaging dialogue, and I love chit-chatting with people. But the mechanism of the marketing, which is ironic because, again, the day job has a lot to do with strategizing this kind of approach for companies. I'd rather just write a post. I'd rather work on my book. I'd rather do a podcast with somebody.
I feel like you've got the right formula here with the podcasts. I mean, it feels like this long format podcast is sort of like your foundation. But the thing I would, if I was giving you, I'll give you some advice, and this advice,
bring it, because again, I started this part of the conversation by telling you I suck at this.
Yeah, this advice plus $11 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Okay,
all right.
So I would recommend that you start doing some short format, like get online with somebody for just 2 minutes and get them to give you the highlights of what they're writing about, and then give them something that they can post. And by them posting, they're posting you.
That's actually a really good idea because, again, I love these immersive conversations. They don't always work out like you and I have worked out. Sometimes it's a little bit pulling teeth. And sometimes, they don't like me and I don't like them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the big challenges I think we've got today is there's people aren't able to have a conversation with people that have differing opinions. I mean, it's just our political environment is just a symptom of that. But I mean, it even goes to things like I was a Colts fan for years and years and years, and my father-in-law was a Patriots fan, and we just couldn't have a conversation about sports, not civilly, right? So it'd be great to get back to the point where you can sit down with somebody and say, I disagree with you. Now let's talk about it and see if we both can learn something,
Absolutely. I've got another show called Bald and Bloviating. And if you look at my archive, you can go to the podcast section. In my Substack page, you'll see me conversing with folks from both extreme sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things to do. I tend to be a libertarian, at least in concept. So that enables me to go point by point. There's aspects of the current administration where I think it's great, and other aspects are a disaster. So I'm not tribal when it comes to politics. And that flexibility in my gift of gab, or at least my enthusiasm for talking to people, enables me to do what a lot of people can't do, which is I can talk to anybody and make it equitable, I think. But I love your observation that do these quickies, like the 5-minute pod, and invite folks. We can even start with your group if you want, like the folks that you reviewed their content. I'd be happy to do 5-minute pods, so we can offer them a 5-minute podcast, and I'll be happy to get them on. They could showcase you review their chapter and chit chat about it. And they could come in and you could join us too. And then we could have a quick 5-minute pod and we can bang out 10 of these, and then everyone posts, and then we're building community in a way that's very organic. Like you're the herder of the cats in this sense for this.
I think everybody will herd cats to you.
And then I'm the bloviating bald guy who loves to talk about everyone and barf out content.
Yeah. I think that everybody has a vision for their look. The Substack world, and I believe that this is where we're headed as I say as an industry. I haven't made $1 off of writing yet, so I don't know that I have a soapbox from which to talk about the industry. But I started my career in the computer game industry. Okay, I was a game designer and a producer, and worked for one of the top computer game studios in the world, and worked with some of the top computer game programmers in the world, including Sid Meier. And we saw something happen in the last decade in the computer game industry with the advent of Steam. Okay, where independent game developers who were shut out of the industry, forever. Prior to that, right? If you couldn't get a publisher to publish your title, then you couldn't get the advances to actually develop the game, and you were just screwed, right? So Steam came along, and all of a sudden you have this renaissance of independent game developers who literally can just sit at their home and build a game and know that the moment that it's ready, they're going to be able to put it up on Steam and make a living if it's good. And I think we're going to see something similar with the book industry, And I think it's going to be micro fan bases. I think it's going to be
The long tail will get even longer.
yeah,
And I agree with you. If AI does anything well, it's this kind of micro personalization.
yeah,
And I did a series of podcasts on my other show, the Bald Ambition one. You can see a similar theme.
yeah. I see
I
it.
call it the wall. So the good news is everyone and their grandma is a content creator and DIY anything you want. I do podcasts, video rants, content, Substack, TikTok, Instagram, right? YouTube, right? All out, right? And there's very little in the way. And it's free, almost free, very inexpensive. I have a few app subscriptions, a few techie, geekery things, and I'm out there, right? That's the good news. The bad news is everyone else has that same facility. So there's a tsunami of content.
Yeah,
And it's the classic bell curve of quality, right? Like 20% totally sucks. Maybe 2% is awesome. And the rest is hard to even really differentiate. The opportunity there, and I think this is what you're getting at, is we're just seeing the beginning of AI aligning and matching content with audience. And right now, the algorithms suck at this compared to their potential.
yes,
So there's when you look at content, you're revealing so much about yourself. This is the affinity marketing and the cookies and all that. So every time you engage with digital content, it's measured. So your preferences from the second you get online for years are aggregated into a master profile. And content creators, by want of creating content and it being tagged, sliced and diced and reassembled,
yeah,
right? You have an unbelievable amount of specificity when it comes to understanding the individual user like never before. And you have that same kind of detail and specificity and precision when it comes to content and its creation. So the missing link here, how to bust through this wall of so much content as a creator, isn't to sit there and like tag your YouTube video. You put up a YouTube video, you just have to say, not for kids, not AI. And they have these bullshit categories, music,
right.
news. I do this and I'm like, really? This is where we're at in the age of AI? You know what this content is, Google. Take your Gemini and just do your Gemini thing. And you have a base of hundreds of millions of users and you know everything about them.
Yeah,
And yeah, you know what? I'll pay you $100, $200, $500 a month if instead of me going in and flicking switches and keeping my fingers crossed that someone's going to see my content, I'll pay you for your AI to match my shit up with people who want to see
yeah,
it.
yeah. I think that's exactly right. So the problem I think that Google and Amazon and all of these companies have, because it's amazing to me that I'm still sitting down to watch television. I turn on Tubi. I like to watch Looney Tunes. Just nostalgia, and I see commercials, right? And I'm still seeing commercials from, you know, Lilly for some type of psoriasis medication. And it's like, how in the world are we where we are today?
Why?
And I'm seeing commercials where Lilly is basically running a commercial for a medication that is relevant to less than 0.1% of the population, right? And yet 99.9% of the population is wasting their time watching this stupid commercial. So I think the problem is that no one has been able to figure out how to do this at scale. Even Netflix, right? You log into Netflix, and Netflix knows everything that you've watched. And yet, when they do their recommendations, 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 of those things, when I turn them on, they go, nah, it doesn't know what I like. So it's funny that you bring this up. I started working on an app with Claude. It's called Apro Prose. It's either appropriate prose or it's apropos of nothing. I don't know yet which one it is, but I basically told Claude to interview me for an hour about all of the books, movies, television that I like and why, and what I don't like and why. And then I said, build me a taste model. And the taste model came out, and I was like, this is exactly right. And then I gave it 10 other books and movies and television series that we hadn't talked about, and it nailed 9 of 10 in terms of predicting whether or not I would like them or not. Okay? And so I'm sort of toying around with publishing this, not trying to sell it, just publishing it for other people to use. But you can imagine a scenario where you talk to your AI, it models your preferences, and then it looks at a database of serial fiction, of which, I know there's places like, FixStack and stuff that are trying to create archives of serial fiction, but I don't think anybody's really done it justice yet. But you can imagine an AI that's out there scouring the world for serial fiction, and when it finds something that matches your taste model, it comes back, it drags it back to the cave and says, you should read the first chapter of this.
It's not even for serial fiction, it's for everything, right? There's we each have a master profile, right? Of all of our digital engagement. And we could talk about privacy and the power of convenience. And we don't want the AI overlord to know everything about us. But just in our public domain stuff, there's more than enough to do this. And I think the reason it's not happening goes back to the end-shitification scenario I was talking earlier. The sci-fi writer, Dvorak, right? His name. He coined the term end-shitification. So first we screw the user, then we screw the advertiser, right? Because we're creating a monopoly. They have no choice. And those pharmaceutical companies who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on direct-to-consumer advertising that flies over the head and between the legs of 99.998% of the viewers is money.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the obstacles, that the archaic, old school, traditional, and shitified ways have an entrenched infrastructure. And the technology, which is self-evident, not only to you and me, but just about everyone else, that we can do far better at this kind of targeting, is yet to pop. But it's inevitable. Talk about your teleology and your Hegelian inevitability of morality.
Yeah.
I'm going to posit that I don't believe that's true, but I will say eventually we're going to get there.
Yeah.
You're going to be a content creator. And like I said, hello, Sergey and Larry, and Dario Omadai. Hi, it's Mookie here. I will pay you guys a lot of money if you could just connect my podcasts and my rants and my writing, and especially like my science fiction book, which is my pride and joy. I know I've got an audience, but they don't know about me.
Yeah.
And I have enough of an audience for my Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine to be a sleeper hit among 10, 20, 30,000 geeks.
You don't need a lot.
Work at the MIT lab and have spectrum disorder and love Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Yeah. They're there. I know you're there, audience, for my book, but you've never, ever heard of me because the algorithm sucks.
Yeah. Well, the reason they've never heard of you is because nobody has figured out how to make money off of, surfacing you to those people yet. That's going to change.
They figured it out. I just think it's not really easy to do because of this entrenched infrastructure.
Yeah.
They want money from me in a way that's inefficient.
Well, they want money for you for not delivering value. Okay.
Right. That's my point. Promote your podcast and promote your book on Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. And then get an unqualified audience for bank and hope for the best.
Yeah. So I just did a 1-week test on Reddit, targeting the Substack subreddit with paid advertising, $10 a day. Spent $100, and got quite a number of clicks, but no subscriptions. I went to Reddit and posted one time in the same subreddit, just posted to a guy who was asking a question about Substack and how to do something, and had a conversation with the guy, and he said, well, what is your, give me your link to your story, I'll go check it out. And 5 people subscribed. So I don't know what that means, but I think it means to me that there is a way to avoid the not to contribute to the enshittification of social media, to actually get out there. Like, people are starving for authentic engagement. And I think that if you get out there and you engage authentically, you will actually develop an audience. And, this happens all the time. Somebody stumbles across your podcast, somebody stumbles across Inference, and they happen to be an editor at HarperCollins, or it happens to be somebody who's buddies with Joe Rogan, and they go, you know what, you should check this out. And all of a sudden, you're made. So, I don't know.
That's the hope. And at this point, you're made for maybe 5 minutes, because that's the attention span. So even if I've had videos on TikTok go viral. So here's one. This reinforces a lot of what we're talking about. I have the exact same videos that I post on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and sometimes I post them on Substack here too. Let's just look at TikTok and Instagram. Exact same videos, same hashtags, same descriptions, everything the same. I've gone from 0 to about 18,000 followers with 300,000 likes on TikTok in about a year. And I've actually lost followers on Instagram.
That's a platform. That's not a you problem. That's a them problem.
But that's my point. That's exactly, which reinforces everything that you're saying, which is like, you got to engage. How are you going to engage? Well, the algorithm is not your friend.
Yeah. Well, you've thrown out a hook to me twice in this conversation so far, which, if we're getting close to the end, I'll bite on the hook finally, and that is my branding for Inference is that it's the first fiction for both carbon and silicon readers. And
I like it.
I don't know if it's the first, but I couldn't find anybody else that was claiming that. And the idea being that we know that bots consume content. Like, we know they're on Twitter, we know they're on all of the social media platforms, and we know that they're reading and they're posting and they're responding. Okay, and it's to me a logical leap that with bots in particular, like personal, AI assistants that you're throwing inside of a Mac Mini and getting it to do things for you, it's only a matter of time before somebody writes a skill that basically turns these things into literary, sniffers, right? So that's sort of the apropos app that I was talking about, but other people are going to do it. And when they do it, these bots are going to go out looking for content, looking for stories, looking for authors. And they're not going to go look for the authors that are already in Barnes and Nobles, because there's already tools that allow you to search those things. So I think it's only a matter of time before we begin to get, going back to the Steam, analog, we're going to begin to get somebody out there that is finding, sort of well-hidden fiction and surfacing the good stuff. And so
I think that's great. I mean, I've got a former colleague, and she works at a company, 3Cube AI. And what they do is, instead of search engine optimization, they look at this and they optimize for the bots.
Yep.
Like, the bots are scraping, they've got different criteria. You're not meta tagging anymore. You just need relevant content that's associated with potential targets.
Well,
the bots are going to...
You have to make sure that the bots are able to get to the content, because one of the big problems with the frontier models is that they're blocked by JavaScript, right? And a lot of content uses JScript, and so I think there's, just like search engine optimization is sort of like dominated, web.
That's gonna be bot optimization.
Yeah, right. You're absolutely going to have a ton of companies that are focused on that, and I think that I don't know, but I think that you're going to be able to ask. You're going to be able to be much more specific with AIs about the kind of stuff that you're really into. And so somebody's going to be able to say, I'm interested in stories, stories about space travel that, that use your particular type of technology that I've forgotten already. And
the Alcubierre, I want a Alcubierre dream sequence with an alluring alien kitty.
And they'll find you. They'll find you, right? And so
it'll find me, and again, to my point too, it'll do this in the background.
Yeah.
Which is it knows based on my prior reading that the Alcubierre sequence in Mookie's novel with the alluring alien kitty will appeal to me.
Well, that's right, and that's going to happen. And I think what it's going to allow is what I was talking about earlier, or we were talking about earlier, which is micro audiences. Like you only need 10,000 people. You might not even need 10. You might get away with even, like, if you have 5,000 or 1,000 people doing a $5 a month subscription, a lot of writers are going to be able to parlay that into full-time writing.
Awesome. And this goes full circle. We began this conversation by being Pollyanna in this whirlwind shit show of AI doomsaying. We talked about how we use AI, respectively, with some crossover for our creativity. And we're landing on a very hopeful vision of being independent content creators and capitalizing on the unprecedented opportunity for AI helping to match our content with readers, many of whom are bots.
Many of whom are going to be connected to us through bots. Yes.
Right. It's been awesome, David. I really appreciate it. Let's follow up. If you're into it, I would love to club up with you, and then we could do those 5-minute podcasts offering for your growing community. And you've inspired me to be a better Substacker, to be a more collaborative community builder rather than a manic content creator. I think that's a good thing.
Well, I'm glad. I think that right now, authentic community building is the road less traveled, and I think that's where there's more opportunity.
That's great, and it's the most human endeavor of them all, right? Like, well, let's create our own tribes within tribes within tribes. And that, if nothing else, is immune to some of the negative impact of the bots, ironically enough, which is you can't deprive us of our humanity, especially if we gather together to celebrate it.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Podcast. It's been thrilling having David T. on board. Check him out on Substack. He's got the Infers novel that he's building in serial version with the bots talking to each other, dealing with everyday events, top line news, and emergent translation of that into your action, which is so cool. Thanks so much. We'll put description of where to find David, read Inference, and all the goodies in the description. Like, comment, and share. And I'd love to follow up with you. Let's see how we're doing in a few months to compare notes and continue building the community, which is so awesome to do. Thank you so much.